Hello, today I'm looking at You by the MC5. This is a classic bit of rock and roll, contains not one but three great guitar solos from the late great Wayne Kramer. Wayne Kramer actually died quite recently, I think at the start of this year. A few people have requested that I look at this tune, which I think contains some of his finest playing. So let's get started. I want to begin by just playing through the first guitar solo and then I'll start breaking things down for you. For those of you not familiar with the MC5, they came out of Detroit in the late 60s and they had kind of an intense garage rock kind of a sound. I think a very strong case could be made for them having invented punk music. I mean, probably alongside fellow Detroit band, the Stooges. And certainly they were very influential on the next generation of musicians and the whole sort of CBGB's punk scene, which came a few years later. Now, this particular song comes from their second album, Back in the USA, which I think came out in 1970. And I think this is a great record. I think people have mixed feelings about this record. I think coming after their first record, which was a live recording, Kick Out the Jams, the Back in the USA feels a little bit safer. It's a bit more produced, but it still contains some great songs on it, and I do really love this record. The third one's pretty great as well. And I should also point out that there are a couple of different recordings of this tune. This lesson is based on the Back in the USA studio recording. There is an earlier single version which is fantastic. It's a really wild, noisy recording, totally brilliant, but I just don't think that would make such a good lesson, as the guitar playing is not really reproducible. Let's get started then. I'm going to look at all three main solos. Towards the end of the video I'm going to talk about the gear that I'm using, but I want to begin by breaking down the main riff. This is straightforward enough, just two power chords. So we've got an E power chord. This is 5th string root, so we've got 7 on the A and then 9 on the D and 9 on the G. So E power chord and E5. Just want to be careful with muting here. You don't want any extra notes creeping in there, so I'm using my first finger just to nudge into the low E string to keep that muted, and then my first finger is just resting on the top two strings to keep those muted. Then I can hit all the strings quite aggressively, and I'm only going to hear the 3 notes that I want to hear. So we're going from that E5, taking that down 2 frets, and you've got a D5, just going back and forth between those 2 chords. And the rhythm is 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. So there's a little bit of syncopation in there. It's 1 and 2 and. It's emphasising the and of 2. So you've got that first chord hit, just releasing pressure with your fretting and to create a rest, and then you've got that little push. And you can just hear some little slides in there as well. That I think you don't need to overthink those slides. They just happen anyway, I think, as you're moving between those 2 chords. I'm going to break down these solos then, and I would say with soloing like this, it's not necessarily the best idea to learn all of this stuff note for note. I mean, for the purposes of this video, I'm trying to play these solos note for note. Certainly in my tab, my transcription, I'm going to write these things out note for note. But I think the best policy with this kind of wild, improvised rock and roll soloing is probably just to soak up the vibe of it, maybe steal a few licks and ideas, and then do things your own way. And literally just an hour ago, as I was preparing to film this, I came across a Wayne Kramer lesson on this tune, and he seems to be giving a guitar lesson to some young kid and showing him how to play these solos, which is brilliant. It's well worth a watch, and he doesn't actually go into loads of detail about what he's doing, but it's great to see his technique up close and see some of the nuances of his style, but he doesn't explain everything, so I hope there's still some point in me making this video. It's not utterly pointless. I mean, well, maybe it is utterly pointless, but I've got to amuse myself and keep myself busy somehow. Anyway, this solo starts off with a great ascending idea that literally takes you from one end of the guitar fretboard to the other. It starts on the open low E string and then climbs up all the way to the highest fret on this guitar, the 21st fret on a Strat, and he's really just climbing straight up the E minor scale. So starting with that low E, F sharp, G, A, B, then I'm crossing over onto the next string, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A and B, then I'm crossing again, C, D, E, and then F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, and then all the way up as far as this high C sharp. And you can do this in various different ways. I think you can cross the strings in different places. You know, watching this Wayne Kramer video that I was talking about, he plays it one way at the start and then he plays it again at the end, and he plays it slightly differently. So I don't think it has to be totally a fixed part. And in terms of the notes here, it's mostly the E minor scale. It starts off just the straight E natural minor scale, but then he's throwing in some C sharps as well. So here, which is a really nice color, and that's the natural 6, so that could be seen as the E Dorian mode. I mean, over this pair of chords, the E to the D, you can really play the E natural minor scale, the E Dorian mode, the E blues scale, or a mixture of all three of those things, which is what Wayne Kramer is doing in this solo. So he's climbing all the way up to the highest note on this guitar, the 21st fret, and then he starts descending. So again, just straight down the E minor scale, and you're picking the first note 3 times, and then it's either a pull off or a slide to work your way down. And then you're in position here, into this 12th fret kind of a position, and he starts launching into these classic rock and roll Chuck Berry licks. Again, in this video he talks about these being licks that he's just stolen direct from Chuck Berry, and of course back in the USA it's named after the Chuck Berry song, and the album finishes with a cover of that tune. And then we've got this lick. So classic Chuck Berry, just bending at 15 on the B, down that minor pentatonic scale. Classic Chuck Berryism, so bend at 14 on the G, and then 12 and 12 on the B and high E, and then a bend on the top string at the 15th fret, and then so variations on that lick. And the first solo ends with just some nice high bends, so 15th fret on the top string, and Wayne Kramer is adding some nice vibrato to these bends. So actually quite a difficult skill, adding vibrato to bends. You do need quite a lot of strength and control with this. So you want to bend the string, get that note in tune, and then add vibrato. And for me it's kind of a movement of the wrist, like a rotation of the wrist. I'm getting the bend in tune, just releasing it slightly and then bending it up to pitch again. So he's doing that at the 15th fret, and then moving up to the 17th fret, and then the solo ends with a kind of an overbend at the 17th fret, so bending kind of 1.5 tones. The second solo goes something like this. I'm attempting to do this more or less note for note, but obviously I can't completely reproduce what Wayne Kramer is doing, so forgive me if I get 1 or 2 little details wrong here and there. before the solo proper starts, we've actually got some feedback, and he's playing some sustained notes. Obviously he's got his guitar turned up quite loud, and these notes are feeding back, and you're actually hearing a note that sounds an octave higher. So it's kind of the 14th fret, 12th, I think he's sometimes going up to the 17th fret as well. So you can experiment with that. You need to have your amp quite loud, and then probably just move around until you find that sweet spot where you're generating that note that's an octave higher. And then he launches into the solo proper. So really just some more Chuck Berry stuff. It starts off with a slide kind of up to the 12th fret. I'm playing 12 on the D, G and B strings, and then some more Chuck Berry kind of stuff. So starting off with this lick which I just discussed, and then just going between these two notes, so 12 on the top string and then bending 15 on the B, and just playing around with that. And you can kind of play it, turn around the rhythm of that a little bit as well. You can start with having the bend on the beat, on beat 1, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you can repeat the top note. Repeating the top note a few more times, you can turn the rhythm round so you've got the top note on the beat instead, so 1 and 2 and 3 and that way you can generate quite a lot of mileage just out of a very simple idea, just by changing the rhythm, changing the emphasis a little bit. And the solo builds in intensity, and we're moving on to the top string, and then we're heading into this idea, which is a real Wayne Kramer signature, I think. And at first I thought it was triplets, so this kind of idea. And sometimes he does seem to be doing that, but most of the time I'm actually hearing an extra note, so it's more like this. And this is kind of confirmed when you look at the video footage, I think. So I'm actually, you're going to have to use your pinky here. I mean, if I were just playing triplets, I probably wouldn't use my pinky and I'd just play that kind of idea. But if you're using your little finger, you can pull off from 15 to 14 to 13 and to 12, and you've got this kind of idea. I think the 13th fret's not always sounding. Sometimes it is more of a triplet, but if you listen very closely, more often than not that 13th fret note is in there. So actually a really good finger exercise for pull-offs, using all 4 fingers of your fretting hand. So it might take a little bit of work to get that up to speed, and just to get the strength and control on that. But then once you've got it, you can just move it across the strings. So take it from the B from the high E to the B to the G, and I don't know if there's a particular pattern to it. You can just play around with that idea. So and then the solo kind of climaxes by just repeating that idea on the top string. Bend. I do like that final lick actually. It's kind of a pre-bend at 15 on the B, 12 on the B, little bend slightly sharp on the G. So a nice bluesy idea. Great end to the solo. First 2 solos are quite different from one another, but I think the third solo is quite similar to the second solo. A lot of similar material in there, but I do particularly like this opening lick. So some great kind of E minor pentatonic, but it's got some blues scale stuff going on here. We're including this note here, 15 on the G. This is the flat fifth, and we've got, so kind of coming down the scale, but we've got 15, 14, 12 coming down to the root. So that's a nice lick which might well be worth stealing. Then some more Chuck Berry-ish stuff. Really just, it's, you know, you don't need to learn this stuff note for note, but we're going into that idea again. So bending the D and the E on the top string. And then just the very end of the tune, during the fade out, we've got some more of this. So much the same as before. And that's really it. And I would suggest just going through these solos, stealing a lick here and there, but mainly just soaking up the whole Wayne Kramer vibe and trying to get a bit of his attitude into your soloing. It really is great stuff. It's kind of the language of rock and roll and punk, this kind of playing. Let's talk gear then, and I'm assuming that on the original recording Wayne Kramer would have used his famous Strat, which had a stars and stripes paint job, and quite unusually it had a humbucker fitted in the middle position, which was played quite an important part in his sound. I think no idea what amps he would have used at that kind of period, or whether he would use pedals. If anyone's got any information on that, do let me know. But I'm using my Strat. This is a 60s reissue Strat. No humbucker in this Strat, but I think it works reasonably well for this tune. I'm just using the bridge pickup. I'm going through my Fender Princeton. That's just the amp that I've kind of got set up next to me. It's kind of ready to record, and using a couple of pedals. So for the riff, I was actually using the Golden Fleece pedal, which I spoke about in last week's video, or the week before last's video, which is kind of a fuzzy sounding distortion pedal. Works great for those kind of 60s tones, particularly on the riff to this song. And then for the solo, I was actually using this pedal here. It's a Marshall Shred Master pedal, so bringing you some more shred content on this channel. And I just thought that suited the sound of this song. It kind of matched the original recording fairly closely. It's got a nice, quite saturated sound, nice mid-range to it as well. So I've not used that pedal for quite some time, but it does work really well for a solo kind of a pedal. Some sounds then. This is just the Princeton, which I'm running completely clean. And then the Golden Fleece. And then for the solo, I turned off the Golden Fleece and turned on the Shredmaster. That's it for this video. Tab and backing track over on the Patreon page. As usual, pay what you like. And a big thanks to everyone on the Patreon page for their support. It's really making a massive difference to my ability to keep on making these videos. So thanks very much for that. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time.